Let's talk about piecewise functions. A piecewise function is a function that has multiple lines within the same graph. So when we're graphing these functions, the first thing we're going to do is create an XY table for each row in the function. Then we're going to start each table with the first number in its inequality for the X value, determine the corresponding Y values, and highlight any points that will have a hole, and we're going to plot those points. So here we go. This is an example of a piecewise function. We have two different lines, one where we have x minus 2 and one where it's x plus 3, and the location of it depends on this inequality right here. So we're only going to use this graph x minus 2 for all of the values where x is less than -1. Then whenever x is greater than or equal to -1, we're going to use the line x plus 3. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create an XY table for each row. Here we have two rows, so I'm going to create two tables. So for this first table, I'm just going to look at the function f of x equals x minus 2. And from the second table, I'm just going to look at the function f of x equals x plus 3. I'm going to start by saying, okay, I know I need to be less than -1. So the first x value I'm going to put is -1. Now, what is the y value that goes with this x value? To figure that out, we're just going to substitute -1 in. So -1 minus 2 gives us -3. Then we want all of the x values to be smaller than -1. So we just need to pick any two x values that are smaller than -1. So we're getting farther away from 0 here. So we could pick -2 and -3. You could pick -5 and -10. Any x values that are less than -1. And we're going to figure out their corresponding y values. So when we substitute those in, -2 minus 2 is -4, and -3 minus 2 is -5. Next, we're going to highlight wherever we might have a hole. To figure out if we have a hole, that's where we look at the signs that go with our x values. So here, x is strictly less than -1. That means at -1, that's where we're going to have a hole. So here we'll have a hole. Anything below that's not going to have a hole, just at that -1. So I'm going to go ahead and plot this section of the piecewise function, then we'll worry about the other section. So we've got -1, -3. There's a hole there, so I'm going to leave that open circle. We've also got -2, -4, -3, -5, and it would just go on from there. So these are all part of this red line, this first part of the function. Now we're going to look at the blue part, the second line. Here we've got x plus 3. Again, I'm going to use this number, whichever numbers with this x is greater than or equal to. I'm going to start with that. So here again, we're starting with -1. It won't always be the same, it just depends on what you're given up here. Starting with -1, now we're going to substitute that into this equation. So now we have -1 plus 3, which is 2. Then we're taking any numbers that are greater than -1, greater than or equal to -1. We've already used -1, something bigger than that. We could do 2, we could also do 6, anything that is bigger than -1. So when I do that, 2 plus 3 is 5, and 6 plus 3 is 9. So now we can plot these points. Here, since it's greater than or equal to, we're not going to have a hole. So at -1, we're going to go up 2, and we're going to have a regular point, a filled-in circle there. Then at 2, we're going up 5, and at 6, we're going up to 9, and then there is this line. So the last thing we need to do is figure out the domain and range. Remember, the domain is the set of all the x values. That's where you're going to go from left to right. The range is the set of all the y values from the bottom to the top. So, starting from the left, we have this arrow pointing to the left, so our domain is going to start at -infinity. Then as we follow the red line, it goes until we get to -1, but there's a hole there. However, up here at -1, there's a filled-in circle, so that means -1 is included. We don't need to put a union, so we can just keep on going, and this arrow is going to the right forever, so we're going towards infinity. Now for the range, from low to high, so the lowest that this goes, we have this arrow pointing downward. Again, we're starting at -infinity. And then it goes up until we get to this y value of -3. Here, from -3, it jumps all the way to 2. So we're actually going to put -3, and it's a whole, so we're going to put parentheses. And then we're going to put our union, because it's making a jump. These are not connected in any way. So since we're jumping up, our next y value isn't until 2. So we're going to start at 2. This one gets a bracket. And then it's going up forever, so it's going towards infinity. So let me just say that one more time. Our domain is from left to right. From the left, we got to -1. Here it had a hole. Here it did not. So -1 is still included, so we don't need to make any jumps. We're just going to keep on going to infinity. But for the range, we don't have anything between -3 and 2. We don't include -2, -1, 0, or 1. So we're going to have that union that starts from -3, we jump to 2, and then we keep on going.